Welcome back. In this video, I want to cover just a broad overview of the Zettelkasten boxes and how those all work together, and go into a little bit more detail about what I mean when I say that I'm using digital to go analog. And with that in mind, I'm going to be showing you some examples of my actual cards of things that I have personally put together. And so with that in mind, I just want to have a little bit of a legal non-disclosure agreement between me and you, where you understand that the actual cards that I have contained in the vault that I'm going to show you are being used for training and explanation purposes. And I consider it to be my knowledge, my information, my property, I guess you could say. And as such, I'm asking that you not disclose the actual information on the cards or the system that I created to any other party without my express written consent. And that's because I actually show you cards that I put together when I had my own sparks of inspiration, or my neural explosions, as I like to call them. And I'm sharing this information with you because I want you to see how it can really work to help you make those connections within the card system. But again, I'm just asking that you respect my knowledge and how I came up with these ideas and these concepts, and just use them as examples, not use them to further your own writing or anything of that nature. I hope that makes sense, okay? And with that, let's get back to the desktop, and we're gonna go ahead and start reviewing the Zettelkasten files so that you understand how it's laid out and how it's going to work. And we'll also review some of the components of using digital to go analog, and what kind of things I put in place to help me do that as efficiently and as effectively as possible, with the understanding that the whole goal of doing this system is to not only organize my thoughts and to make connections between disparate pieces of information, but to also help me remember what it is that I'm reading and learning and studying about, so that I can effectively speak about it in public forums or in my published articles or in my book. So with that, let's move over to the desktop and we'll start talking about using digital to go analog. So you should be seeing the vault that we had set up in our last video. And the first thing I want you to click on is this little message here that says, "Hi, read this first." Now, I'm obviously not going to go through and read this, but this just kind of explains to you how it was developed, where you could purchase Scott's book in case the link on YouTube didn't work for you. And then I also talk about the entire table of academic disciplines, which I call the toad. There's two places that you can access this toad. The first is by using your control button and your mouse. You can click on this, and I actually have the entire table of academic disciplines built right in within the vault for you, so that you can search for the discipline that you think works the best for your particular card, and you can address it accordingly. Alternatively, in the file, and I have a lot of files on my computer, in the file that I had you download is the table of academic disciplines in a PDF format with a hyperlinked, sorry, I said hyperactive, but with a hyperlinked table of contents. So clicking with your mouse button will take you right there so that you can see it. So I just happened to click on natural science. And so you can see that the structure is based on a much larger zeroed number to cover a main discipline within the table of academic disciplines, and there are 5 of them. And then there's the sub-disciplines within that broader heading. For in this case, there's biology, and then each of the categories underneath biology are also assigned their own number. Looking at this here, if we go ahead and put in our right side panel, including the table of contents. I'll click this button here. Here are the 5 main disciplines within the table of discipline. Here's the ones that fall under humanities. And if I look at law, here are all of the different numbers that work within the legal academic discipline. So that's how the table of academic disciplines is set up, called the TOAD. Scott Shepper in his book recommends being more, I guess, fluid and liberal with the assigning of numbers, saying, you know, if you're going to research or write about law, just start with the first 4 digits of the number, such as 1050, and then build off of that. I opted to go for a much more expansive and detailed numbered table of academic disciplines, specifically because artificial intelligence and emerging technologies, along with their strategic implementation and strategic decision-making processes for a variety of industries, means I am going to be touching more than one general table, more than one general academic discipline. So all of my stuff is not going to fall under humanities. It's not going to fall within social science. It's not going to fall within applied science. I need to be able to move and tie those things much more explicitly than Scott described in his book, Anti-Net Zettelkasten. That doesn't mean mine's the right way and his is the wrong way. It doesn't mean that his way is the right way and that mine's the wrong way. It's just going to show that you can tailor your Zettelkasten system to what will work best for you and how you want to use it. Now, I have these all included within the vault, but if your focus is going to be much more narrow, say just on humanities, feel free to delete the extra vaults and file systems that I have within here that you feel like you're not going to use. Not a problem. I've tried to give you more than you need, because it's always easier to delete what you don't and keep what you want than to necessarily rebuild it specifically to meet your specific needs. And so that's the table of disciplines. We've already talked about the plugin in our prior video and what its purpose is. Just to remind you that this does provide a word count, which shows up down here in this lower corner. And we'll talk about that some more when we start discussing using digital to go analog. And then here's the overview again of your file tree. So you can see that this just kind of outlines what's here and it matches what's here. We'll be going through each one of these individually as we move through this video series. All right. Let's start talking about using digital to go analog. I hear ya, right? Even though we're using a digital system, trying to follow the Anti-Net analog process as much as possible seems a little bit contradictory. And I get that. I mean, people are like, hey, say, what? You know, using digital to go analog, how does that work? I brought you back on camera for a minute because I wanted to show you some of the tools that I use in order to use digital tools and work with an analog mindset. The first tool is going to seem a little odd, but it's this. And I hope you can see this pretty well on my camera. So there you go. This is a wireless keyboard that's specifically designed to mimic a typewriter. I have spent over 35 years typing, and I can type at the speed of approximately 100 words a minute, or at the speed that most people talk on a traditional typewriter. I do not want to have that level of speed when I'm working within my Zettelkasten, because it's more important to slow down, to think about what I'm writing, to be deliberate in the choices of words that I select, to be much more cognizant of what I am trying to communicate. And since I am not writing it out by hand, which is obviously a very slow analog process, I am using the digital note cards. I wanted to find a way to slow down my typing. Now, if you're a hunt and pecker and you use 1 or 2 fingers, you may not need to change your keyboard like I did. I opted to go with something with the typewriter feel for a couple of reasons. One, it feels nice, right? I'm still wanting to be comfortable and ergonomical in my office space layout for obviously health reasons. But I like the typewriter feel of the keyboard because the keys are placed slightly higher than they are on a traditional keyboard, and this requires a little bit more pressure to push down that key, which therefore makes me type a little bit slower. I know it sounds silly, but these are little things that I have decided to do to try to get my mindset into more of an analog mindset than a digital mindset. And using a different keyboard, it's a simple thing, but it just triggers in my head, hey, I'm using the typewriter keyboard. I need to be more deliberate in what I'm writing. I need to be more deliberate in what words I'm using. I need to be more deliberate in how I'm rephrasing this concept into my own words. The next thing that's really important is to remember that even though we are using Obsidian, a digital tool, that really Obsidian is just giving us our cards in a slightly different format and fashion. The card is what you see on the monitor. So this piece right here, this tab, equates to a single card. Now, there's ways to reinforce that this is a card, and there's a couple of ways that that can be done. My personal favorite is to use an iPad, and I'll show you how I do that next. So in order to replicate the reading of things that are in a digital format and the creation of my cards, I actually use my iPad. So here on my iPad is the PDF of a research article. I have all of my research articles uploaded to a Google Drive as well as to Zotero, which I'll talk about later. And I read all of these research articles on my iPad. This serves a couple of purposes. One, I can still do my highlighting and noting and things that I would normally do on a printed piece of paper for the research article, but I can't copy and paste into my Obsidian, and that's really important. I don't want to use any of the shortcuts that are native to software. I want to make sure that I am typing word for word what I want to say, or if I'm quoting exactly what the researchers have said within their study. And you can't do that if you're having your PDF on one monitor and your Obsidian on the other monitor, and you're copying and pasting between the two programs. You simply lose a lot of the mnemonics and memory and function that you need as part of the analog process. Okay, the next thing I do is I like to keep my digital workspace clean. And I talked about this a little bit before. These are my boxes. So if I open a box, just like I would physically, when I'm done with that box, I take the time to close the box. I want to open up my bibliography box. I want to look for a specific tab. There's my card that's filed behind that specific tab. Here's the card. Here's the tab. When I'm done looking at it, I close my box. Again, I try to follow the analog process within the digital platform as much as possible. Keeping my workspace clean also means closing these side panels so that I only have the card in front of me that I am working on at that moment. When it's time to file the card, I open up the left side panel. To me, this is the equivalent of walking to my table of card boxes, and I select the box and the tab where I want to file it. Okay, a couple of other things. There's obviously a lot of native tools within Obsidian. It's a software program and it can be used in a variety of ways. I can use the search icon here and search through my file tree system if I want to. You can also use Control F and find words or phrases within a specific note card, and you can use the search functionality to look for headings or subheadings depending on how it's programmed within the card on the right hand side. I do not recommend using any of these tools because again it negates the purpose of having an analog process. Now that being said, I do have one exception, and that, if I go back in here, that exception has to do with the table of academic disciplines. In printed format, I think the table of academic disciplines is roughly 58 pages long. I'm not going to take the time to scroll through 58 pages if I kind of know what I'm looking for. So, for example, I'm interested in something that pertains to ethics. Ethics are very important in artificial intelligence. So if I type in ethics, I can see, okay, there's applied ethics, there's meta ethics, which you can see by the hyperlink here I've used. There's also descriptive ethics, normative ethics. So there's a lot of different things that pertain to ethics, and I can select the ones that I believe work the best for the card that I have. And we'll go into that into more detail. But that is the one exception that I have for finding something using the search or control F options. It really is in your best interest to not use these tools, but to actually move in and out and through this file system as if it were the actual physical Zettelkasten boxes. I also don't use shortcuts. So that's your Control C to copy, Control X to cut, Control V to paste. I also do not set up any of the hot links. So Obsidian, you can become a master within Obsidian. Okay, you can learn how to use all of its bells and whistles, all of the tools, all the plugins. But what Scott Scheper says is that becoming a master of Obsidian is becoming a master master at procrastination. And that is not what we want. And I'll be honest, this is something that I struggle with. I have always spent my life working on being highly productive and as efficient as possible, leveraging all of the time management skills that I have within my toolbox to get as much done as possible. That does not work when you are doing research on a continuous basis for writing for publications or for writing a book or for preparing for presentations or working on my dissertation that I will have to orally defend. I needed a way to force me to slow down and really absorb the information that I am taking and investing all of this time into studying. And so this is my exception. This is the one area that I do not worry about my productivity. I do not worry about my time management, with the exception of maybe trying to get 2 or 3 research articles reviewed and processed and carted out within a day. Haven't quite gotten there yet because the process does take me a little bit of time since I'm still in the early stages of using the system. Finally, I try to stay within the card self-imposed limit. So I actually created within Word the various sizes of cards that Scott Scheper recommends for different purposes and figured out how many words per card could fit on average based on that size using a Times New Roman font at a 10 points. Okay, and I found that for a 4x6 card, which is a pretty common standard card, that I could fit roughly 275 words on it in a portrait position or 250 words on it in a landscape position. So I have set the rule for myself to stay within the 275 word limit. This in itself can be challenging. It does help me make my writing much more condensed. I tend to trim out any excess words that I possibly can and still retain as much of the concept as I need. And that's why that word count becomes so critical. Now, again, there's always exceptions to every rule. I do not stay within the 275 word count if I'm discussing a complex theory. To break a complex theory out into multiple cards, in my opinion, is going to make it get lost or disjointed or somehow mixed up with other theories and end up with a convoluted mess. So I will allow, in writing about complex theories, to go over that 275 word limit. In my mind, that's no different than, say, cross-referencing to an entire page of information filed somewhere else. Rather than file it somewhere else, I'm keeping it within my Zettelkasten system, and it's there, and it just exceeds the limit. The other exception is, of course, any of my instructions that I have provided within the welcome folder on how to use the system. I did, stay outside of the 275 word limits because I felt it was important to keep the thought of instructions together as much as possible. And then of course the table of academic disciplines, being that it is roughly 58 pages long in its word format, definitely does not stay within the 275 word limit. And so that's how I managed to use digital to go analog. And in our next set of videos, we'll go ahead and review each of these boxes in depth. But for right now, I just want to give you a very broad overview. So we do have the index box. That is a physical box by itself. And inside that box are 26 tabs, basically labeled A to Z. Now, in the digital world, you cannot have files with the same name. It can cause a whole host of issues. So instead of just labeling my tabs A to Z, I did include the word that tells me which box it goes to. There's the bibliography box. Again, this is a separate box. Inside this box are the bibliography cards, or bib for short. There's 26 tabs. Again, A to Z, and labeled with the bib in front, just like the index, to prevent any issues with identical naming. The next box, I call it the terms, concepts, and theories box. In letter 19, which you can subscribe to, I'll put a link in the description below for you, Scott actually talks about creating a vocab box. To me, vocabulary is too narrow. Vocabulary implies a single word with a definition. So I expanded mine to be terms, concepts, and theories. Again, I just have the 26 folders. I did use just the word terms as a way of naming it, and it's A to Z. And inside of this box is where I will put things that define terms, like a traditional vocab box, but I also have in here concepts. So there's some pretty, I guess, elaborate components of artificial intelligence. So under A, I might have something that's a simple term, an algorithm. But under concept, I might have something a little bit more complex, like machine learning or neural network. And then there's theories. There's all sorts of theories that come into play when you're looking at emerging technologies, artificial intelligence, and the strategic incorporation and planning of both. For example, control theories. There's informal control theories and there's formal control theories. And so I needed one box that I could put all of that information in, knowing that it could be used to supplement any of my Zettelkasten cards, regardless of the academic discipline under which those fall. The next box is really a collection of boxes. You can have just one Zettelkasten box, or in my case, I have 5 Zettelkasten boxes, one for each of the major academic disciplines. So I have a Zettelkasten box for humanities, I have a Zettelkasten box for social science, another one for natural science, one for formal science, and one for applied science. Within each of these boxes are tabs, and each tab represents a series of numbers defining a very specific discipline within that broader heading. So there's performing arts, visual arts, history, so on and so forth, that all fall under the humanities. Now, if you're doing this as a physical box, you might only reference one number on your tab. I'm lazy and I struggle with thinking about where does a number fall. If I have to say, okay, is it a 101, is it a 102, or a 103? For me, it's much easier to see the range of numbers so that I know exactly where it needs to go. I created a template box. Now, this is something that is not available in the analog world, but I created it because it ensures that each of my cards are as consistent as possible, that I don't forget anything that I think is important to put on it, and that they all follow a certain flow, for lack of a better word. I also created a box that I call my work in progress box, and we'll go through this into more detail. But inside the work in progress box are tabs, and these tabs tie to a specific project, spark of inspiration, or neural explosion that I want to do more work on. There's other boxes included in the more academic versions of the Zettelkasten system that I have on my website. And those include an integrated training box that shows how to use the more advanced system, that talks about proper referencing, sourcing, things that are important from an academic perspective. And then the most advanced box also includes an entire box dedicated solely to the dissertation process and includes a complete outline of everything that's required to complete your dissertation. So that's an overview of each of the boxes that are in this basic system, along with what's available and some of the more expensive options that are available on my website. So just to review, in this video we covered a lot of information, so you might want to watch it more than once, and that's okay. We talked about the welcome message within the vault and reviewed kind of what it provided, information about the word count plugin that I use and why I use that plugin. We also went through the using digital to go analog and what kind of tools and systems I've set up in place to help ensure that I follow the analog process as much as possible within the digital platform, including the purchase of a special keyboard to help me type slower and using my iPad as my quote-unquote paper version of my research articles so that I am not tempted to copy and paste from one medium into my cards within Obsidian. We also reviewed the various boxes that are included within this Zettelkasten vault from a very high level. Next, we'll start going through each of the boxes individually so that you can see how they work, and eventually, at the conclusion of this playlist series, hopefully you will see how each of the boxes connect with one another and can help you have your own sparks of inspiration or neural explosions that will take you to the next level of creativity and knowledge sharing. Thanks for coming, and I hope to see you again in the next video.